Well, here we are. I don't get to do videos very often because I live in the Boston area and I run a company up here and I don't have a lot of spare time, but I enjoy doing them. If you like them, I can try to work a way to do more of them. And I like to talk about and take a look at the news and really try to figure out what's going on, because the news media is, according to the latest polling, is at the lowest, as far as trust goes, the lowest it's been in decades and decades and decades, I think since the late 1960s. And the same goes for trust in the government, to tell you the truth, which has plummeted massively, and I think a lot of it has to do with the behavior of the federal government and the media over the last 4 years of the Trump administration. Regardless of what you think of the guy, it's pretty clear that the media and the government were lying about him. They had dishonest investigations. The media ran cover for Joe Biden over and over and over, and very blatantly so, as did social media during the campaign, all in an effort to get the president out of there. And whether you voted for Trump or not, it's irrelevant. What is relevant is that you're being lied to, and if it doesn't bother you, it certainly should. But this is a really interesting story, and this is what I want to start out with. This has to do with, you may have heard of it lately, about the reportings of UFOs. And the fellow that's pictured here, his name is George Knapp. And George Knapp is a highly regarded, very respectable news journalist, career journalist. He's won all kinds of awards, Peabody Awards, and so forth for his investigative work. He's looked into criminal enterprises throughout Nevada and the western U.S. He was also the fellow that brought to the forefront a guy that was widely discredited as a kook named Lazar, who was a fellow who had worked at Area 51, the famous Area 51, and came out and told some pretty wild stories. And what's happening is that what Lazar told Knapp many years ago is beginning to look like the truth. And that's the really amazing part of it, because Lazar was working on energy modules, he claimed, at Area 51 that were taken from some sort of unidentified flying objects that had crashed or something. And everybody thought he was just out of his mind. Well, now we're starting to see the military has videos of these objects that can do these amazing movements and from no apparent energy source. And this is exactly what George Knapp has been talking about for years. And I want you to hear this latest report, because there is a report coming up in the government, but this is why the report's coming out. Videos are leaking all over the place of these UFOs, and they're coming from highly regarded sources, and now the Pentagon is confirming that they are true. All right, it's not the Pentagon has got to give out a report this month, so we'll see what they have to say, but they have admitted these are true, and George is going to explain it.
Thanks, Brian. Over the past 3 years or so, the public has been able to see several astounding images of what certainly qualify as UFOs during encounters with the U.S. Navy. There's no question that the Pentagon has censored data to go along with the photos and videos, but none of that information has been leaked or otherwise released. That is, until today.
For 2 long hours on the night of July 15, 2019, the crew of the USS Omaha detected on multiple sensor systems unknown objects that surrounded the ship as it moved through ocean waters west of San Diego. One of the objects, a self-illuminated sphere at least 6 feet in diameter, flew alongside the Omaha for an extended period and was observed through a thermal sensor in the ship's combat center. Filmmaker Jeremy Corbell released the Navy video weeks ago and says similar events were reported by 8 other Navy ships in the same area over 3 days.
Mark bearing and range.
There was numerous warships that are having similar appearing.
Now keep in mind, this fellow is not claiming they are UFOs or anything. All he's saying is, we just think these are very mysterious and very strange. There was also another report that the Pentagon admitted to that said that one of these spaceships or one of these things went into the ocean and was traveling. They tracked it on sonar, traveling underwater at excess of 160 miles per hour. It doesn't sound physically possible, but that's what was happening.
Coordinated interaction. And this whole series was within this kind of, I'd say, circumference of 100 miles, and there was up to 50 to 100 contacts.
In the last 3 years, the Pentagon has reluctantly confirmed the legitimacy of UFO images captured by Navy ships and air crews, including these photos taken off the coast of Virginia and the better-known videos, the so-called Tic Tac incident and the gimbal. But other than the images themselves, there's been no release of sensor data to buttress these cases. There is now.
OD, if you can write a general lat long where we're at.
If you don't know what this is this is a live screen caught on one of the Navy ships where they were tracking. This is the radar system where they were actually tracking these objects. You're actually looking at what they're seeing and what you just saw a minute ago. Think about that for a minute. It's pretty amazing.
The number of contacts you got, get the course and speed meters off them.
Over a period of hours, crew members on the USS Omaha, which is located in the center of this radar screen, monitored the approach of the unknown objects, as many as 14 at one point, all around the ship. 2 different radar systems watched the objects and estimated their speed.
Track 781 just sped up to 46 knots, 50 knots, closing in. Oh, actually 38 knots. Quite fast.
That one's pretty much perfectly 000 relative, right?
Yeah.
Corbell obtained the images from sources he declines to identify. The Pentagon's UAP task force considers the Omaha spheres to be true unknowns. The ships that were under observation by the unknowns were unable to track where they came from or where they disappeared to. The Omaha sphere appears to have vanished into the ocean.
What was splashed? Splashed.
At that point, it also vanished from all sensors. In one video snippet, 9 of the objects were seen around the Omaha, but 2 of them dropped off, somehow invisible to 2 radar systems.
And it supports the hypothesis that these are not just a balloon dropping into the water, or it's not something that is easily explained. These are true unidentifieds in mass number, and we'll talk more about that, but that's what we're showing people, where you have radar data that goes with FLIR data, what everybody has been belly aching for. So here you go.
If these are foreign-made high-tech drones, how do they fly with no wings, rotors, or detectable exhaust? Do they possess some sort of cloaking ability? The sensor data, combined with the video images, raises difficult questions.
These are unidentified. We don't know what they are. Everybody tries to corner me in saying they're aliens or something like this. I have no idea.
Maintain track as best you can.
George Knapp, 8 News Now.
The video of the radar screens consists of 4 clips that were spliced together to show that this went on over a period of time. Today, less than 4 hours after that video was made public by us, a Pentagon spokesperson confirmed it is legit, that it was recorded by Navy personnel and is in the hands of the UAP task force. That's the unit created to prepare a report for Congress that is due next. Videos recorded by U.S. Navy.
All right, and that's it. That's that story, and this is the re-intro to it. So take from it what you want, but it looks like there's something pretty interesting going on out there. And after nearly 70 years of the federal government denying that these things happened, even though Harry Truman actually wrote a letter and talked about flying saucers over the White House. It's a very famous letter. He actually talked about unidentified flying objects over the White House at one point. It seems like there's some folks are going to come up and talk about this. And keep in mind, too, that these UFO sightings are not uncommon. Many people in the U.S. space program talk about having seen things like this. The British have had an extensive program on it where they've recorded similar types of videos that have been more widely talked about in Europe, but not as much as this, and as well as Russia and other countries, any place basically with an advanced era. It was even a major sighting off of Peru by the Peruvian Air Force, and they recorded it. So we'll follow it along and see what happens. It's pretty interesting. It's a good bit of news. And the other thing I want to talk about is the latest news about Hunter Biden. And I know a lot of people don't really care about it because Hunter is obviously a really screwed up guy. The problem is that it is beginning to appear like Joe Biden has been lying through his teeth about his involvement with his son and his business. There's been a cache of emails have been released. And the horrifying part of it, of course, was that Facebook and Twitter and the major media outlets in the United States, when the story first broke, of course, about Hunter's laptop, and it is legitimate. They actually have now the receipt with Hunter's signature on it where he dropped it off at the store. He can, nobody can deny it. It's got all of his personal information on it, pictures of him, all this other crazy stuff, and it's being dissected and hidden. I think probably by the FBI. They don't want to fall into the ire of Joe Biden. But at any rate, this is all very legitimate. And now there's an email out where that contradicts completely Joe Biden's comment that when he was asked how much did he get involved with his son's Hunter's businesses, especially with Burisma and the $3.5 million that Hunter got mysteriously from the ex-mayor's wife of Moscow. For some reason, she decided to give him his company $3.5 million. And then, of course, there's all the money coming from China that they got over $1 billion, $1.5 billion through a Chinese bank, which is basically the Communist Party because they own the bank. Joe said he had nothing to do with his son's business, never discussed it. Well, here is a series of emails they dug out where Joe met for dinner with Hunter and his business partners in Washington, D.C. while he was vice president. This is a major thing. Hunter Biden wrote a friend before the 2015 Washington, D.C. dinner that it was ostensibly to discuss food security, but was in fact an opportunity to introduce his potential clients and partners to his powerful father. The shocking communications appear to fly in the face of the president's claim that he had no knowledge of his son's business activities. Yet the White House has remained silent on the revelations and has failed to respond to every request for comment about illegal activity and scandalous behavior evidenced on Hunter's abandoned laptop, obtained exclusively and verified by the Daily Mail. So these things have been leaked out to not only the Daily Mail, the Washington Post has had copies of it, CNN has had it, they just chose not to publish any of it. All this stuff has been widely disseminated. Now people are going through the emails, and here they all are. They're reproduced, they have the headers, all the information. In the U.S. Treasury back then even flagged suspicious activity reports of $3.5 million in the wires sent by Baturina, who was the mayor's wife of Moscow, to Hunter's firm, which was known as Rosemont Seneca Thornton LLC in 2014, while Joe was vice president. And the interesting thing is that 2 months after, regarding Hunter's money, within 2 months of Joe leaving office, his pay from Burisma was cut in half because he was no longer as necessary as he was when his father obviously was vice president. And this really throws some dirt on Joe Biden, who has refused to discuss this, and don't expect your government to do anything about this. I think the FBI is going to sit on this and bury it until Joe is long out of office. I don't think that this is going to go anywhere, and I think Hunter knows that. All right. The other issue that's sort of interesting is that Kamala Harris, poor Kamala, who's basically done nothing since she's become vice president. She's done some giggling and made some awfully stupid speeches, but she was appointed, as you remember, to sort of head up the task force dealing with the Triangle countries and the 180,000 people a month, almost 180,000 people a month coming over the U.S. border since they've relaxed all of the regulations on it and reversed all of the Trump era policies. Thousands of people a day are turning up at the border. They're still getting over. They estimate 150,000 to 160,000 more than they've caught have gotten through the border. There's been a massive spike in the smuggling of arms, massive spike in drugs, and they're now finding that they're not only getting people from the Triangle countries, but I think it was up to 87 other countries. People have been caught trying to come through the border, including a lot of Middle Easterners. But now the problem is that she wants to run for president at some point, of course, and she's in trouble for it because she hasn't done anything. They know she hasn't done anything. So now her staff is trying to distance her from having anything to do with the border. She's not responsible for the border. It's not her thing. This isn't in her portfolio, so to speak. So they're trying to just say, well, she's only dealing with the diplomatic side of the Triangle countries. And they're desperately trying now to salvage her future prospects to run for president. If anybody votes for this woman to be president, you're out of your minds. So that's all very interesting. And other news, too, is that this is sort of an amusing side story. The BLM co-founder, Patrice Cullors, she was the lady, you remember, a month or so ago was the head of BLM, and she went out and spent millions of dollars on multiple homes. And everybody was saying, well, what the heck is going on there with that? I thought she was a socialist and a communist and so on and so forth. Well, she is a communist, but she sort of. It turns out she has left. She's quit BLM, if you didn't know. She's gone from there. And she signed a book deal with AT&T, who owns Warner. So she's going to be doing television and new book deals, and she's going to be cashing in more than she already has on her fame as a communist, which is just sort of funny and hilarious and so forth. And in other BLM news, this fellow is quit BLM. This just came out the other day. He had joined it. He was Rashad Turner was his name. He was one of the founders of a big group in St. Paul for BLM. And what he found out was that BLM, after being with them for a couple of years, don't give a damn about black people. They're just out to break things and make a lot of noise and raise money. And that's all they're really into. So he quit. Good for him. Good for him. But BLM is basically a phony organization, a bunch of terrorists. That's all they are. And now on to this. This is a very interesting story. This has to do with the COVID thing, and the sudden reversal by the U.S. media on the notion that it could have come from a lab. Because as you recall, a year ago, the media reflexively called it a debunked conspiracy theory when nothing had been actually debunked at all. Nobody had even looked at the origins of the COVID virus, but it was because Tom Cotton and Pompeo all said that there's strong evidence that we think it probably came from the lab there. Now, something important to keep in mind always about the Wuhan virology lab. In China, there are roughly 43 important research centers to do with disease and illnesses and viruses and so forth. The only one in China that works with COVID viruses is the Wuhan lab. It's the only one. The other ones work on diabetes and all kinds of medical conditions, but the only one dealing with viruses and lethal pathogens is this. And now there's a report out that in 2015 that the Chinese military, who has a presence in this lab, had been sending cables or emails or communications discussing the possible advantages of militarizing some of these vaccines. For military purposes, and one Chinese officer was apparently said, and this is why Trump said they think it came from the lab, of course, because they knew this a year ago, but they couldn't release it because of national security, that the next major war could well be a biological war. It's very important. So what happened, but this has to do with right here, is how it came in that they were doing the work there at all. And this is a thing called the Cambridge Working Group. And they are a group of scientists that wrote a letter and basically said back in 2014 that we cannot be involved in this because of incidents that occurred in assorted laboratories regarding anthrax and bird flu and so forth. And here it says, recent incidents involving smallpox, anthrax, and bird flu in some of the top U.S. laboratories remind us of the fallibility of even the most secure laboratories. Now, bear in mind, Wuhan has had a lot of problems in the past with sloppy management, poor hygiene. They've had illnesses and all kinds of little outbreaks there. Reinforcing the urgent need for a thorough reassessment of biosafety. Such incidents, this is 2014, they're saying this, such incidents have been accelerating and have been occurring on average over twice a week with regulated pathogens in academic and government labs across the country, across the United States. This was going on. An accidental infection with any pathogen is concerning, but accident risks with newly created potential pandemic pathogens raise grave new concerns. Laboratory creation of highly transmittable novel strains of dangerous viruses, especially but not limited to influenza, poses substantially increased risks. An accidental infection in such a setting could trigger outbreaks that would be difficult or impossible to control. Historically, new strains of influenza, once they've established transmission in human populations, have infected a quarter or more of the world's population within 2 years. They said this in 2014. They were basically saying gain-of-function research is what they were doing at Wuhan should not be done in the United States, and they put a moratorium on it. And these are all the scientists: Harvard University, University College of London, MIT. I'm seeing a lot of names on here, all over the world. All said you can't be doing this. This is really, really bad. All right. Now, keep in mind that Fauci said in 2011 that gain-of-function research, in an interview that's recently surfaced, he likes the idea very much. All right. And then here you have a letter from the Lancet, a report, 2018, ban on gain-of-function ends. They ended it for some reason. In 2014, several breaches of protocol at U.S. government labs brought matters to a head. The news that dozens of workers at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention might have been exposed to anthrax, that vials of smallpox viruses have been left lying around in National Institute of Health storerooms. That's Anthony Fauci's operation, and that the CDC had unwittingly sent out samples of these things of ordinary influenza virus contaminated with H5N1, and it shook faith in the country's biosafety procedures. And then it refers back to that letter. Over 200 scientists walked out and said, "Don't do it anymore." All right. Well, they came back around and they decided they wanted to do it. They had to do it, even though a number of people said that there is nothing for the purposes of surveillance that we did not already know. Enhancing potential pandemic pathogens is in this manner is simply not worth the risk. All right, there were a lot of people on the sidelines, major scientists, saying don't get involved in this stuff. It's too damn dangerous. And then the NIH is really committed to leadership on this. Other countries see our systems as potential model, said Wolonitz, the Lancet infectious disease expert. And if we are pursuing this research in an active way, we will be much better positioned to develop protection and countermeasures should something bad happen in another country. All right, so they decided to reverse it. And here we are a couple of years later. It appears that the NIH was Anthony Fauci. He danced around it, but he was indirectly funding. He was funding an organization. He granted money to an organization that then they themselves granted money to the Wuhan lab. And this is a huge political can of worms among the scientific community. And this is why you're seeing so much hard-ass pushback on it, because none of them want to deal with any of it. And as you know, in China, after this thing broke out, we now know that there were cases going back into November. Now 3 cases that they've confirmed, people that got it in November. There was the doctor that posted the results of their test results from the Wuhan lab that the Chinese government immediately took down offline, and the guy was punished for it. A couple of Wuhan doctors have mysteriously died of the virus, and there's some speculation how that happened. There's a lot going on. And now the WHO said COVID origin investigation is being poisoned by politics. All right, they have a lot of nerve. And this is Den Ross, who is not a doctor at all. He's a corrupt African politician that took over the WHO, is now sort of running interference for China because China has massive amounts of influence over the WHO. They've had a year to clean up and get rid of all the evidence. They have destroyed all the evidence. There's now a cave in China that's been talked about that was discovered back in 2012, where they took a lot of COVID bat samples, where they hadn't jumped from bats to humans yet, and they believe that this is what they used as the basis for their research. The Wall Street Journal has covered it and so forth. CNN, CNBC, all these news outlets are backtracking on the story. And here's the thing the Wall Street Journal did. This is the Wuhan lab. They are guarding it night and day. Nobody can get in and so forth. And here it says, in April of 2012, 6 miners here fell sick with a mysterious illness after entering the mine to clear bat guano, which they harvest to use for fertilizer. 3 of them died. The Chinese scientists from the Wuhan Institute of Virology were called in to investigate and work after taking samples from the bats in the mine. they identified several new coronaviruses. Now unanswered questions about the illness, the virus found at the site, and the research done with them have elevated into the mainstream once an idea dismissed as a conspiracy theory. You all remember that. Just the way they dismissed is ridiculous, that Trump didn't have something to do with the Russians, and just like Hunter Biden and all these stories that you were misled on by the mainstream media that have all proven to be, whether you like Trump or not, everything he said, he's been proven right much more than he was ever proven wrong, and they're all starting to eat crow. CNN has lost 70% of their audience in the last 5 months because nobody believes them anymore. They don't believe them. They think they're clowns. And here you have this story now where they're now beginning to suspect that this virus that may have gotten out of the lab began with samples taken back in 2012 that they were working on at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is the Wuhan lab. All right, so there's much more to come on it. The whole thing is absolutely crazy, and we'll see what happens going down the road in the future. But don't expect a lot of integrity from the media. Do your own homework. And if you like these videos, let me know. We'll try to do more of them. There's always something to talk about. And subscribe if you want. Please do. All righty, and share it with your friends. And maybe I'll do my best to actually bring actual stories. These are real stories. These aren't my spin. I'm just reading what I found through other sources that don't get a lot of attention and what's obvious. Okay. Have a great week. Bye.